Welcome to Lecture 19 in Communication 1110, Fundamentals of Speech. This is a continuation of Lecture 18, which was about nonverbal communication. In those, I talked about chronemics, haptics, proxemics, kinesics, oculesics, subjectics. But in this one, I'm going to look specifically at vocalics, which you can tell has to do with the voice. This being a public speaking course, the voice is very important because if you recall, one of the things we talked about earlier that really bothers people is when a speaker is monotone, or what I would call mono-rate. They don't have any variety. So the voice is very important to a public speaker. So I want to first of all give you the definition of a word called paralanguage. It's a very good word. When we hear the word para in front of a word, it usually means alongside or with. And paralanguage is what the voice part of nonverbal communication is. It adds to, it goes along with the meaning of the words that you say. And it's very hard for us sometimes to even divorce those two. If I say, "You look good in that outfit," I can say it 10 different ways. "You look good in that outfit," as opposed to someone else. "You look good in that outfit" sounds a little sketchy, as my son would say. "You look good in that outfit" means as opposed to something else. "You look good in that outfit" sounds kind of questioning. So there are many different ways that you can say it, and it's the same 6 words, but it means very different things. And so that is how paralanguage works. On top of that, you want an energetic and varied voice to keep your audience interested. The voice is produced by 4 steps, and you can see from the lecture guide, this one's sort of a matrix or a graph, that it has a column that says the step of voice production, then the definition, then the part of the body that's involved, then what it's responsible for, the characteristic of the voice, then problems and suggestions. So as you go through this, you'll be filling in those blanks to try to keep this specific. Now, as I said, there are 4 steps of voice production. They are respiration, phonation, resonation, and articulation. And I did it that way to keep them so that they rhyme. But of course, the first one is respiration, and that's breathing. Speaking is a form of exhaling, so breath support and breathing correctly when you speak correctly influences speaking. All of the lungs should be involved in the breathing, not just the top part. A lot of times when we breathe, we're just more or less using the clavicular breathing, it's called, the top part, or the thoracic, the top part of the chest, when we should use the whole of the lungs to have breath support. If your abdomen expands, you know that you're using diaphragmatic breathing. The diaphragm is a little muscle that's below your visceral organs, if you will, and it contracts and expands to control the lungs. Another part of breathing that's important, and this gets into the problem side of it, is that people have poor posture, and that cuts off the ability for the lungs to have a lot of space. If you're like this, if this is your natural posture, you're not going to be able to breathe as well. So I want to talk a little bit about posture here. As you stand, you should have your feet a few inches apart and pointing ahead, your toes pointing ahead. You want to be sure your knees are not locked because that will hurt your breathing. It will hurt your air getting to your brain, which isn't good. You should especially think about your torso. I want you to roll your shoulders back and feel how good that feels, first of all. And notice that it now puts your arms at the sides, as opposed to a lot of people stand with their arms in front of them. So you want to roll your shoulders back. When you're speaking, this is what you should look like, not like this. Okay? And feel that, and now your lungs have a whole lot more space. And a lot of you probably grew a couple of inches too, as far as that's concerned. But you have a lot more space, and this will allow you to breathe. It will also give you more freedom with your gestures, and you'll have more erect posture, and you'll look good. And then think of a string coming out of your head and sort of pulling you up. Now, this might seem uncomfortable for some of you because you're not used to it, but when you think about it, it's much better for your back, for your breathing, for your overall look and well-being. You're going to be able to get more air, more oxygen into your system, which means you're going to be more lively, and have a more lively voice, but also you're going to be less likely to yawn as well, because yawning comes from a lack of oxygen. So think about your posture, and then if we were in class, one thing I would have you do now is we would all say the alphabet in one voice. And you think, oh, that's not hard. No, I don't want you to do it fast. I want you to do it at about this kind of a clip, okay? And you should be able to breathe enough slowly to get enough air to do that. And it's kind of a nice challenge for you, but it shows you the difference between breathing with this part of the lungs or using all of the lungs for breath support, as we call it. So breathing definitely has problems if you don't have good posture. It also has problems if you're tense, because it tends to lock up some parts of your lungs and your air passages. The characteristic of the voice that breathing is responsible for is volume, which makes sense because you have a more volume of air in your lungs, and so you're going to have a larger volume of sound. However, while volume sometimes is useful, it is not a good characteristic of the voice for meaning, and it's not something you want to use very often, just getting louder in a speech to emphasize. It's not a good means of emphasis. On the other hand, of course, you want to be sure that you're loud enough that everyone can hear. In class, I've probably mentioned when you are speaking that you want to be slow enough and loud enough and distinct enough. And if you slow down and are loud, you'll probably be distinct enough because you'll be conscious of it. So again, posture matters a great deal here in breathing. The second step of voice production is phonation. Now phonation, you see the word phone, like telephone, and that has to do with the production of the voice in the vocal folds of the larynx. And the vocal folds are two pieces of tissue right in here that when you start to speak naturally close up and vibrate to create your voice. It's not the voice that we hear, but it is your voice. It's the sound. The vocal folds are responsible for the pitch of your voice, so that if you have larger vocal folds, you probably have a deeper voice, like the guitar string at the top is thicker, so it's a deeper sound. And if you have smaller ones, like a child, they have a higher pitched voice. Pitch is the best form of emphasis for meaning. And that's why we say if somebody is monotone, we don't get any sense of difference of meaning. It's also very hard to listen to. One of the problems with pitch, though, of course, is that you can't really change the pitch of your voice. You're kind of stuck with the natural pitch that you're given. That doesn't mean you can't vary your pitch for meaning. But if you think your voice is naturally too high, sorry, you're stuck with it. You can't make your voice deep like this all the time. You will hurt your vocal folds. Lack of pitch comes from lack of energy and interest. If you're interested in what you're saying, you're going to be naturally varied. So pick a topic that you're interested in. Don't read from your notes a lot. If you're reading, you're going to be much more likely to be monotone and monorate as well. If you practice and you're excited, you'll have pitch variety. The third step of voice production is resonation. Resonation, and that is how the voice that's created here in the vocal folds, very small, kind of tinny voice, then is amplified and vibrated through the larynx and the mouth, the oral cavity, and the nasal cavity, or what we tend to call the sinuses, although there's more involved in it than that. And resonation makes the quality of your voice. And quality is what makes it possible for me to tell your voice from someone else's. Just like fingerprints, we all have a voice print that's going to be a little bit different. And of course, with some people in a family, you often can't tell the difference, but scientifically, if you had a voice print, you could. So everyone has his or her own quality of voice. Quality is an interesting study because, you know, people have good quality of their voices. They often become actors or they go into radio work. We don't expect somebody who sounds like this to be in the radio. We want to listen to somebody with a good quality. of their voice. There can also be certain types of poor quality. One type of poor quality is breathiness, when too much air is coming through. And we tend to associate that with someone who's kind of an airhead or not very bright. Another is nasality. Nasality, where all the sounds are being resonated in the nasal area up here. Another type is denasality, where none of the sounds are being resonated in the nose. Actually, the sounds N, M, and ing are supposed to be resonated in the nose, and all the others are resonated in the mouth. So a person who is denasal, for example, they have a cold and can't resonate here, will resonate everything through the mouth, and it sounds like they have a cold. Another type of poor quality is harshness, which usually comes from inflammation in the larynx area. And the other is hoarseness, which usually comes from some sort of obstruction in that area. Now, some of these are physical. You know, if you have harshness and inflammation, you have to go to the doctor and see about that. But the nasality and the denasality tend to be from habit and people just not opening their mouths enough to get the sounds out. So those are some things that can be worked on. Some things about the voice are physical, they're medical, they have to be dealt with that way, but other things are just habit and laziness. Quality helps you to create word color with your voice. So you can make a word sound like its meaning. If something is soft, you wouldn't say it's soft, you would say it's soft. That's word color. If it's harsh, or you would say it harshly, not harsh. So that's word color, making words sound like they mean. And this adds to interest. And if you listen to the radio or you listen to people's voices, maybe you listen to books on tape, pay attention to how the actors who read these books, how they use their voice in various ways. The fourth step of voice production is articulation. And this, of course, is making the words from the voice. And this is done by the teeth, the tongue, the lips, but also involved are the hard palate and the soft palate. And that's the roof of your mouth, the front of the roof of your mouth and the back. Sounds like ka and ga are articulated in the back, and la and ta are articulated in the front. Articulation, again, makes the meaning of your voice, makes the words, and it is responsible for the characteristic of rate. So I want you to get that connection there. Volume comes from breathing, pitch comes from phonation, quality comes from resonation, and rate comes from articulation. Articulation is important because it's a very good indicator of our emotional state. When we're sad, we usually speak more slowly, but if we're excited, we speak very fast. Articulation can have a lot of problems, as you probably know. Sometimes those problems are due to injuries or medical problems, for example, a stroke or something like that, or if there's a problem with a person's teeth. It can also be that the person has never heard someone say the words correctly, but a lot of our articulation problems come from just plain laziness. We do not make our mouths work. We do not say all the sounds in a word. An example is the word suggestion. I hear a lot of people say suggestion, but there are actually two G sounds in there, the hard G and the soft G. Suggestion, look it up. If you have doubts about how a word is pronounced, you can go to dictionary.com, great resource, and it has a little speaker there to tell you how to pronounce a word. Or you can ask me if you have a doubt in class. We will go over in class some word pronunciation. I have a list of words that are commonly not said correctly, and some of those are regional and some of those are just habits people have heard. And sometimes you just, in a family, a child will say a name wrong, say a word wrong, and then everybody grows up saying the word wrong. So there's reasons for poor articulation, but that's one of the things people will notice, and you want to be sure that you're articulating slowly and correctly. especially when you answer the phone. I've noticed a lot of people when they answer the phone, you can barely understand what they're saying at businesses, and you know, people will judge a business by how the phone is being answered. So again, like monotone, mono-rate is very bad. You want to vary the rate of your voice as well as the pitch. The book lists a fifth characteristic, and you'll notice I have 5 rows there, but I don't have I really don't have anything to say much about dialect. Dialect I don't really consider a characteristic of the voice, but the book does, so I'll mention it here. Everyone has a dialect. Okay, I know that if you go to another part of the country, somebody might say, you have an accent. But you know what? Everyone has an accent. Everyone has a dialect. Dialect is made up of 2 things. It's made up of the words we use in a region or a subculture and the way we pronounce the words. So, for example, in this part of Georgia, if you say, this often happens, you say, get me a Coke. And then somebody said, what kind of Coke you want? You said, well, I want a Pepsi free. You know, they call everything a Coke, whether it's a Coke or not, and they mean a soft drink. And that often happens. Or we might use words like yonder or fixing to. And those are dialect things. Also, dialect is pronunciation. So here we might elongate our vowels, and that's what people usually call an accent. So everybody has one, though. And if they think that Southerners are the only ones that have dialects or accents, then they're wrong. And in conclusion to that, I want to say that you can change your dialect, you can change your accent. I'm from Maryland, and when I was younger, I've heard tapes of myself. I had an extremely strong Northeastern accent, and I learned through being in speech to change that and have a Midwestern accent. So people now ask me, am I from Ohio or Illinois? And I'm not at all. So you can change those things by learning the correct pronunciation of words and getting rid of some of the patterns that we get into. So that's Vocalics. Thank you.